Well, it's campaign season, and the real estate news headlines blared last week that Kamala has a plan to fix America's biggest economic problem, the housing affordability crisis. Do you believe it? Do you believe she has a plan? Do you believe, more importantly, the plan will be effective? I'm Bill Gross. This is my weekly real estate market update. Before we get into the news, though, let's make sure we look at the statistics, know where the market is, and that's going to drive whatever potential solutions there are that make sense. So, in an economy, you have supply and demand. Supply is determined by the number of properties or products available for sale. Demand are by the number of buyers. In real estate, the buyers, the demand side, is based on the interest rates. So let's take a look at interest rates. This week, again, interest rates stayed down low and closed near 6.5%, which if you look at the graph, this is about the lowest it's been since March 2023. It has been, just off the lowest of the lows this past week or week or so. It's amongst the lowest prices we've had. It certainly is low enough to encourage buyers in the market. Now, you have a lot of government forces pushing this. They're putting out good news that later turns out to be bad news. You have the Federal Reserve that has been pumping money into the economy. So certainly for the next few months at least, through the election cycle, we will see, I believe, these kind of low interest rates that should be good enough to keep the housing market at least stable where it is. Now, what that means going forward, hard to say because I have a crystal ball. It's right there. It just doesn't work very well. So anyhow, that's a joke. On the supply side, which is going to offset the number of buyers, is how many sellers or properties available for sale. And when people talk about real estate crash, there's no way there can be a crash unless there's too many sellers in the market that will cause the price to drop, and that's not the case. We take a look at real estate inventory. Here in the Perp, we have 594,000 homes available for sale across the country. The only year that's been lower post-pandemic was last year, was 513,000, so about 12 or 15% higher than last year. But notice, currently the inventory is dropping nationwide, and last year the inventory was slightly rising at this time. So we're basically about to intersect. So it really looks to be around the same number. Now these numbers are all-time lows other than during the pandemic period. Pre-COVID, we had 900,000 or more homes available for sale. So we have very low inventory still, which is keeping up the prices of homes, making it harder for buyers to buy, and I think most importantly, make it impossible for there to be any kind of massive price drop unless something changes in the market. Now, inherently, real estate is a local business, so what's it like in Los Angeles, where I do most of my business, and the market is starting to soften from a strong seller market to a marginal seller market. I use Altos Research for an analysis, and they lowered their number again this week down to 38. It had been 39, then 40, 41. And you can see that ever since, let's say May, we've been going down pretty clearly. Now, we still are slightly on the seller side of the market. There still is not enough inventory for all buyers. There's still not enough, there are more buyers than there are any individual property when we have multiple offers and such, but that's loosening up. And that's a critical trend to pay attention to. Not that it's changed the market, it's changing, and we want to pay attention every day to where that's headed. So what does that mean going forward? Hard to say. It's certainly not great news if you're looking for prices to go up. It might be good news if you're looking for prices to stabilize, and then with inflation driving up your income, making houses more affordable. Okay, let's take a look at the real estate news. One of the biggest news stories, if you haven't been following it, is the biggest shakeup in a century to real estate agents. And this went into effect actually this week. And it's very dramatic. As a active real estate agent, I can tell you that has really changed the way I've had to do business immediately. Buyers who simply want to see a property have to sign an agreement before they can do that. That determines who their agent is and what commission that they want to pay if they buy that property. As a listing agent, our listings have changed to where we no longer can offer commission to the buyer's agents, and all that has to be handled outside of the marketplace, which is really uncomfortable, and it changed the way we do business. So again, that's a change, and that is the biggest change. And this is a 100-year practice in our industry that's changing now because of, again, I would say one lawsuit in one state with one judge and one jury, and the Department of Justice seeking to destroy the real estate agent as a piece of the business. And so all these things are conspiring to make our real estate market, I think, very challenging, particularly for buyers. One of the things that's true when you have a negotiation, wherever you have leverage is the strength. Generally, sellers have leverage and listing agents have leverage over buyers and buyers agents. And so while this is purported to help out buyers and make more transparency, and there's no question in my mind, it's going to hurt the buyers and the buyers agents the most. Okay. Also, the news front, for those of you who wonder why whenever I buy a property or do anything financial, I have all these logins and secure information and to make it so difficult, I have to use encrypted emails, all these banks protecting my information. The answer is no. There's a whole industry on security, but with all that, you should know not only does every company you've probably done business with, have they been hacked and distributed your information, but here the U.S. federal government, who passes these laws, says every single Social Security record ever has been stolen. 2.9 billion records. The government's just so incompetent. And of course, a company would have to send you out a notice and warn you, but the government exempts itself when they violate the law, when they don't handle your information properly. They are exempt from having to notify you. But you need to know, and the only solution, I think, is watching your accounts regularly. I think one of the most important things you should be doing is looking at your checking account, savings account. I have mine set up where every transaction I get an email. And I've consolidated my accounts, consolidated the credit cards to a few places I watch very closely. Because if you're not watching things, you are more vulnerable than ever, I think, as far as the crime and hacking and such. One thing you don't want to see is your local city the subject of a article like this one. WTF, we'll forgo the word, what the blank, happened to Santa Monica, California. This is Graham Stephan. He's a great internet personality. And he shows how many empty spots are. Now, Santa Monica was one of the wealthiest communities in America, one of the highest end retail spaces. And now we have homeless people living in the parks, which both is unseemly, but more importantly is unsafe to walk around with money and goods. He walked around the 3rd Street Promenade and showed how many stores were closed, how little traffic there was. And so what we've seen is now the beginning of the destruction of retail businesses and stores at a scale we haven't even imagined. You know, we have these policies, and there are companies that hang on for 6 months, a year or two. They have a lease, but when the lease is up, they give up. And so we're now starting to see in Santa Monica, in one of the premier places, shopping places in America, people now, companies giving up and turning over the keys. And as a result, that what used to be one of the finest retail experiences in America has now fallen apart. Industry news, I love when other cities or states have news that is as bad as California, like we're not the only place in the world that's bad. Most recently, we had news on squatters, or I would call home stealing, people who take your house and don't pay for it. Kevin Spacey, famously, is an actor who was accused of impropriety, had his luxury waterfront home in Baltimore auctioned off for $3.2 million, and he lost it in foreclosure sale, and now he is refusing to leave the property. So basically, he is a squatter and in his own home. So squatters aren't always low-priced anonymous deadbeats. Sometimes they're high-priced celebrities and attorneys. But it's just interesting how what used to be so rare is becoming more and more normal. And the thing I would alert you to is just kind of the momentum of criminality and its effects. There's a lag time that you see things being bad and you wonder how bad they can be. They're not as bad as they're gonna be yet. And that there's a perfect example of that. Speaking of bad, one of the companies, I think one of the forces of evil in real estate is the monopoly known as Zillow. They are the gorilla in the jungle, by far the biggest capitalized company in the real estate industry, who sought and effectively destroys the business, one real estate agent at a time, and attempts to really take over the whole industry. And you say, well, Bill, that's kind of a callous way of saying that. Well, it's interesting. They now have a new CEO. Now, this is a company that's never really paid any federal income tax, worth $8 billion. And the owners, primarily these two stockholders, are worth tens of millions of dollars, if not more, and live life like kings. But the one thing they don't do is pay federal income taxes, because the whole thing is just a Ponzi. No, that's not quite right. It's just a gimmick, the venture-funded company that can destroy other companies that pay taxes while they don't. But the new CEO kind of let the cat out of the bag. When he talks about their strategy and what's next for the company, is Zillow in the selling leads business, which traditionally they were. In his interview, the new president said, whether shopping for a home, getting pre-approved for a mortgage, making an offer, or closing on a house, that is our customer. And so the thing you need to realize as a real estate agent in particular is Zillow looks at what you think is your customer as their customer. And when you're buying the leads from them, you're really just working for them on that transaction, and their goal in the long run is that is their customer. They are your competitor, and they're looking to enslave realtors along the way. That's why when they bought the showing service for real estate agents, realtors like us revolted and created our own. We didn't want Zillow to have access to every showing that we did and every listing we have across the country. And so really, this is a company that I think is a force of bad in my experience, the 10, 12 years they've been around, since I think 2012. They've done nothing but make the life of the average realtor worse. I don't believe they service customers. There's other companies, they have online services that do things, and everybody is frustrated with the Zillow estimate inaccuracy. So again, this is one of those cases where we have these large companies that have a great brand, and I'm not really sure why, where people just in general think of their company at first glance as, well, they're great. Maybe it's all the advertising they do. But certainly they're not helping our industry in my experience. So the title of this talk this week is Kamala Harris has a plan to fix one of America's biggest problems. And is that good news or bad news? And, I don't want to get into an election political discussion. I do want to talk about real estate. And does government programming help us or hurt us? Currently today, real estate finance is an entirely government program. Over 95% of all mortgages are either done by the government or guaranteed by the government or so highly regulated by the government that the government agencies determine the rules. So we've really lost the competitive market on the finance side. That's why getting mortgages more and more feels like going to the post office or DMV, unless that's the competitive business I started with in the industry 35 years ago. So you have running for president two people, one lifetime politician, Kamala Harris, and the other one, real estate industry and entertainer, Donald Trump, and former president. It's really interesting that Donald Trump, who's probably built more housing than any president in the history of America, doesn't have a housing plan as such. But his plan is to help the economy and overall people making more money, having less debt can buy more houses. Whereas Kamala, who's never worked in the real estate industry ever, I don't know that she bought a house. She was married to a very wealthy man, but I don't know that she ever worked and saved money to buy her own home, or she never worked in the real estate industry. As Attorney General, she was a government employee her entire career. But somehow now she's going to put out a plan that is going to help us all in our industry buy more houses. So I'm going to throw my penalty flag and say, nonsense. Why do I say that? Well, let's take a look at what's happening now. Now, you might hold the current administration, use that as an example of Kamala's strength or weakness. How have we been doing overall in the market? Well, housing starts, in terms of the number of houses being built in America, is declining. It went down dramatically in July, 6.8%, and more importantly, permits fell by 4%. So really the housing market, which is very much tied to interest rates, which is very much tied to government spending, is plummeting. And the only way out of our housing in affordability crisis is going to be building more housing. I think everybody knows that. Take a look at this historical chart. I've shown it before. 2000, we were building more houses than we are now. From 2000 all the way until 2008's crash. And we finally recovered around 2020. Finally, after all that time, we've been gradually recovering since 2011. It takes time for builders to capitalize, buy land, get plans, get regulations. So we've been on a recovery cycle. But look at all the houses we lost for that 10-year period that weren't built. Of course, COVID disrupts everything, and I don't think anybody's responsible for that. But you can see that while we had been on a recovery, of late now, we are back into a decline. So post-COVID, our housing has bucked the long-term trend, and we're actually, for the first time, doing worse than ever, other than the crash, other than COVID, over these last 3 or 4 years. And that was when the Biden administration came into account. So you can surely see that whatever the Biden administration has done, now you might say, well, Kamala and the president are fighting. She wants to build houses, he doesn't. I'd like to see you make that case. So how's our track record been on similar matters? Well, somebody made a point that one of the keys of the Biden administration was building more EV stations. They promised to build millions of electric vehicle charger stations, and in 4 years they've only built 8. There's another statistic shows that while we spent billions of dollars to create internet access across the country in rural areas, there was nobody who's been connected to the internet as a result of the program. And even CNN, who would have to say is friendly to Democrats and to Kamala Harris, is saying that really all Kamala Harris's plan does is raise the price of housing by handing out money to everybody. It's like Monopoly. You hand out more money to everybody. Everybody has more money. The ones who buy right away get in and pocket the profit, and the rest of. But even CNN says Kamala Harris's housing proposal just add $25,000 to the price of every home in America. Of course, that only happens if it's successful. Another, what would have been friendly, you would think, source of information, the Washington Post, basically says that when you put a college economist, maybe you don't propose price controls, it's hard to exaggerate how bad her price gouging proposal is. And at the end of the day, people will need to make money and be able to save money in order to buy more houses. So let's take a look at the particulars of her housing plan, point by point, because I think it's only fair to get down to the details and say, is this really going to help us or not? Is this a pattern we've seen before? So if you take a look at her actual plan, they promised to give up to $25,000 in down payment support for first-time buyers. Of course, we're not sure who that ends up being as a first-time buyer. You know, I think it's hard to read. Is that hard to read in your end? Let me try something real quick. Let me try making it bigger, see if that helps a little bit. Okay, they're going to give $25,000 in down payment support and then $10,000 tax credit. Well, where does that money come from? Either it comes from other taxpayers who now can't afford to buy a house because they're paying taxes, or it comes from deficits, which cause inflation, which raises interest rates, which makes it harder for everybody to buy a house. So you can see that giving money to people is really never a solution to getting more houses. The tax incentives for builders to build starter homes, and expansion of tax incentive for builders to build affordable housing. Well, that's all we're really building in Los Angeles, because by regulation, the city doesn't want anything but affordable housing being built. That's a different discussion. But again, you can see tax incentives. All that means is they're going to take money from maybe the buyers of the houses and give it to the builders, or they're going to deficit spend, which will raise rates for everybody, make it harder. Then we're going to have a new $40 billion innovation fund. So the government is going to take $40 billion of taxpayer money or new deficit spending, and they're going to invest it, if you can imagine, like they're Silicon Valley investors in an innovation fund to learn how to build more houses. $40 billion. Repurpose of federal land for affordable housing. Well, that makes sense, actually. If there's one thing that makes sense, is open up more land for building in California, in Riverside and San Bernardino County. A ban on algorithm-driven price-setting tools for landlords to set rents. So what they're going to say to landlords is you can't use certain computer programs that are effective in setting rents. You need to kind of wing it on your own so prices won't go up much. And then to remove tax benefits for investors who buy large numbers of single-family homes. So what they're going to do is, for people who want to live in a home but can't afford it and buy it but want to rent, they're going to prevent that. They're going to stop big corporations. Now, I get the flip side is, you don't want the BlackRock's competing with first-time home buyers, but at the same time, now you're going to take BlackRock out from helping people even rent houses. So you have the government now, Kamala Harris to be particular, deciding who should buy, who should rent, who should build, who should invest into new technology. And if you believe her that she's capable of doing that, by all means, support the plan. Personally, as you know, my contention in this series has been nonstop. The government will promise to do things, and if you're lucky, not do anything. Because everything they've sought to do has made things worse. Every government program in my career, starting in 1986, has only made housing less affordable, more expensive, and has separated the haves and have-nots. And so now we have those two options. And again, you can make decisions on former President Trump or Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, on whatever issues you want. But on the real estate plan, what we need to do is not fall for the trick of being promised something for free because somebody else is going to pay for it, because that somebody else is always us. What do you think? Like, don't like this, comment, love to hear your points. If I can help, please reach out at Bill Goes Probate on social media. BillGoesProbate.com is my website. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.